thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Flora Cardoni, and I'm the field director with Penn Environment, the statewide citizen-based environmental advocacy organization. I know a lot of you are familiar with us, but a few new faces. So just so everyone knows, we are a group that believes everyone should have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, protected public parks to enjoy, and a safe and livable climate. And we work to make that vision a reality by working with all of you, mobilizing citizen support from across Pennsylvania to really win real results for our environment and climate. So thank you all for joining us today in the Zoom and on Facebook. We really appreciate it. And I also want to extend a special thank you to our guests of honor here today, U.S. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, Mary Gay Scanlon, and Chrissy Houlihan. Thank you all so much for being here and for all of your work on our environment and climate. I know everyone here is very excited to hear from the representatives, so I'll turn it over to them in just a moment. But before I kick it off, I wanted to just remind everyone of a few features of Zoom and a little bit about why we're here today. So first, the webinar is being recorded and streamed to Facebook, so you can definitely revisit it later or share it from there. Second, we want to keep the webinar as interactive as possible, even though everyone's cameras aren't on. So I want to note that there's a couple of ways to participate throughout the event. First, there's the chat feature I mentioned, which you can access by clicking chat at the bottom of your screen, or if you don't see it, click the three dots that say more. That'll open it up to the right, and then make sure you select the word everyone from the drop down next to the word to, so we can all see your chat. You can feel free to put comments there, expressions of support. And if you haven't introduced yourself yet, please do so with your name, where you're calling in from, and one reason you want climate action. A little bit later, we'll do a Q&A session, and there is also a Q&A feature on Zoom labeled Q&A again at the bottom of your screen, or if you click more, you can either type your questions in yourself or anonymously, and we will have time for questions later. So please put your questions in there throughout the event, and we'll get to them in a little bit, but make sure you put questions in there because they often get lost if they're just in the chat. And if you're ever having any trouble with Zoom, please write in the chat, and our field organizer, Ellie, will help you. Now that we've covered the technical stuff, though, let's turn our attention to the topic at hand, which is, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act, what it means for our climate, what it means for all of you. And of course, as everyone on this call knows all too well, the climate crisis is real, it's here, and it's an urgent threat. Here in the Commonwealth, we're experiencing impacts of climate change already, whether it's hotter summers, the drought we experienced this summer, more bad air days, more frequent and intense extreme weather events like Hurricane Ida about a year ago, and a litany of other effects plaguing our communities. And of course, in other parts of the country and world, those impacts are even more severe. And, in the face of those impacts, I know all of our members, many of your constituents across Southeast PA, but also across the state, are really wondering, what we can really do to tackle the climate crisis and make sure future generations of Pennsylvanians have a livable climate to call home. And that's why I'm so happy to be here today with these members of Congress to celebrate a really huge step forward in climate action. So the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed Congress and was signed into law last month, is the largest investment in climate action and clean energy that has ever been passed at the federal level in the United States. And specifically, it includes $370 billion in tax credits and other programs to expand clean energy, improve energy efficiency, reduce air pollution, and really slash planet warming greenhouse gas emissions. And these incentives built into the bill will not just help, our planet and our air, but also will make it easier and more affordable for Pennsylvanians, all of you, to put solar on your roofs, buy an electric vehicle or an electric heat pump, make your home more energy efficient, and more. So also definitely good for our wallets. The Inflation Reduction Act more broadly is poised to cut climate pollution 40% by 2030, which is a huge step forward in doing what we need to do to tackle the climate crisis. And I know it makes me feel a lot more hopeful than I have in a long time about our ability to do what needs to be done. So I want to take a minute to thank all of you on the call, watching on Facebook, or who watch this later at home, for all of your work over the years. Everyone who's written and emailed and called and met with your elected officials, attended events and collected petitions, made your voice heard for climate action. because this bill only passed because you helped, push the importance of climate action forward. And of course, I want to thank Reps Dean, Scanlon, and Houlihan for voting for this bill and for your commitment to environmental protection and climate action. And of course, for being here today. So we'll get more into the bill and what it means in a little bit, but I want to turn it over to talk now with these great members of Congress more about this bill, why they supported it, and what they're excited about. And we'll go in district order. So it is my pleasure to first introduce U.S. Representative Madeleine Dean. Thank you so much. Turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Flora. I am so delighted to be here with you. Hello, Ellie, to you too. Delighted to be with Penn Environment. Thanks for hosting this event. I'm also thrilled to be here with Chrissy Houlihan, Representative Chrissy Houlihan, Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, my partners in crime, along with Susan Wild. We were known as the Fab Four. And so one of the things that we all care about is climate change. So I know I can say that across the board. I've had the chance to work with you in Penn Environment for more than a decade because I was 6.5 years in the Pennsylvania House. So I know of your work, your tenacity, your dependence upon data, numbers, research, actual effects, and what is going on. You have such credibility in this area. And so I love working alongside Penn Environment. You said you've asked each of the people joining us to give you one reason why you're excited about and care about protecting our planet, protecting our environment. I'm going to give you 4. They are Aubrey, Ella, Sawyer, and Scotty, my 4 grandchildren, and all of our children and grandchildren. That's why I'm excited that we're actually finally taking very, very important steps. The Inflation Reduction Act is historic legislation, and I know everybody on this call knows it. And the point, I hope, is that we educate ourselves about it and we educate the public about it so that people take advantage of the resources, this massive set of tax credits and resources that will actually produce numbers, reduction by 40% of greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2040. We have to do that, and we have to do more. I guess the place I always start, you might be tired of this, Flora, but I always start here, which is when I was state representative, I took the time to read the Pennsylvania Constitution. And the most beautiful amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution is Article 1, Section 27, that tells us we, the people of Pennsylvania, have the right to clean air, clean water, and the preservation of our natural aesthetic, not just for us, but for generations to come. I take that really seriously. I took it seriously as a state representative. I take it seriously now as a federal representative. We have a right. It's not just a wish that we protect our planet. People here have a right to the protection of our planet. And that means we are fiduciaries, we are stewards, and we must make sure we protect the planet. I carry that amendment with me. But if you take a look at this building from the bipartisan infrastructure law, the important investments that is making in Pennsylvania to be greener and cleaner, more accessible, more SEPTA, moving people around more efficiently and in a cleaner fashion. Now put on top of that, the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know we'll get into many parts of it, but the federal funding that will bring it will impact how we get to work, the places where we work, in cleaner modes of transportation, cleaner workplaces, support for small businesses to invest in a cleaner environment, cleaner properties, cleaner built environment. It'll invest in people, how they heat and cool their homes, what vehicles they drive, incentives to buy used or new electric vehicles, and more access to the infrastructure that we need. And all along at the baseline of this are good jobs, good American, good Pennsylvania jobs. We've just seen and been through some very difficult economic times with high gas prices. We need to get to a place where we're less dependent on fossil fuels. This bill, this massive set of resources moves us in that direction. I really do love the incentives for people to purchase new and used electric vehicles to make that transition. Tax credits for small businesses, I think, are really phenomenal. And it will also help people with their own heating costs. it's estimated that 610,000 more households in Pennsylvania will install things like solar panels. Think of the difference that that is going to make in a cleaner environment, a cleaner use of energy. So I think what I will do is stop there because there's so much more we will talk about. But I am extremely excited that Congress was able, for the first time in history, to pass this massive bill. It has many other features that are terrific around healthcare and other things that are connected. But when we talk about climate, this is a historic, once in a generation investment. We need to take full advantage of it and do more. And I'll toss it back to you, Flora.
Thank you so much, Rep. Dean. And I have always appreciated your commitment to honoring that part of the Pennsylvania Constitution. And I'm very excited that this bill starts moving us in that direction. It's now my pleasure to introduce Representative Mary Gay Scanlon.
Thank you so much. And thanks for convening the group here today. I don't know that there's one thing that I'm most excited about in this, other than the fact that we finally got something through. I mean, this was not easy. It was not bipartisan, and it really should have been. We had to use the reconciliation process, but we did get it through, and it is an historic investment by the federal government, which, quite frankly, is probably the best thing the federal government can do here, is make the investments to lower the costs of doing the right thing so that we can move things along more quickly than we've been able to in the past. Clearly, in this part of the country, we've begun feeling the effects of a warming world. Tornadoes in southeastern Pennsylvania, come on, this isn't Kansas. But all of a sudden we have to deal with tornadoes. There are parts of my district, and Eastwick always comes to mind first, because it sits adjacent to a flood-prone marsh, and has been experiencing increasingly dramatic flooding. I was out there a couple of years ago when the floodwaters came up and receded so quickly. There were fish on someone's front lawn. I mean, it's nuts, and people have to deal with the aftermath of this. Just failure to plan, failure to address the very real and growing threats of climate change and extreme weather events. So, we have to deal with the property damage, the toxins connected to the flooding. Eastwick in particular is situated next to a Superfund site, which the infrastructure bill is helping us get more money to finish remediation there. But it is this building upon the work that we have been able to get through. Starting with the American Rescue Plan, paying more attention to sustainable environmental issues, dealing with environmental justice, building upon that with the infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, but then really finally getting a significant environmental package across with the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, it's significant, but it is clearly far from enough or far from the final word. And that's where, we need folks who are interested in the environment to continue to press, both in terms of policy suggestions, advocacy, and at the ballot box, because that's what it's going to take to get it done. So I am very excited, particularly in a state or a commonwealth like Pennsylvania, which has been so reliant for hundreds of years on fossil fuels. We have to make these investments in order to move forward. I mean, I've got a district where we still have major refineries. We had one blow up a couple of years ago, but people depend upon this for their jobs, their livelihood, their families. And so we need to make these federal investments to be able to move forward towards a just transition for everyone while preserving the planet for the existential reasons that we really need to get on this. So really, really grateful to your organization and for the folks we have on here today who are paying attention and really doing the hard work of making the policy suggestions that we can try to advance. So thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you so much. And certainly we're excited to keep working with you on to move forward even better policy and to make sure folks can take advantage of this. And I'm really happy that you brought up those other bills, which we were also very excited about and are really helpful for advancing a lot of our environmental priorities. Across all three bills, we've seen money for, remediating lead pipes in schools, which has been a big priority of ours. There's funding for electric vehicle charging stations in the bipartisan bill that now hopefully a growing, electric vehicle incentive, those can work together to spur clean transportation. Money for Amtrak and SEPTA and things will help the climate. And so there's been a lot of exciting things this year. But the Inflation Reduction Act, of course, is a big one. And I'm really excited to see the money for clean energy and energy efficiency really come into the state. With that, I'd love to introduce Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Thank you, Flora, and thank you so much to Penn Environment for organizing this event and for all of the tireless advocates who are on the line here. I want to echo my colleagues' praise and appreciation for you all being here and being present, because I know that Pennsylvania's future is much more bright because of your efforts. So thank you. For those of you guys who have tuned in, I've been reading your chats, and I'm grateful that you're here and that you're enthusiastic and invested in the future of the Commonwealth and the country and the world. And for that, we all thank you. We really, really need, and my colleagues have said this as well, your voices to continue to share the importance of the work that we're talking about, the work that has been done, but also, as they mentioned as well, to make sure that we're recommitting ourselves to the work that still very much remains to be done. We have made some remarkable and historic progress, and I'll talk briefly about that as well. But there really is quite a lot that remains to be done. I'm here because I'm an engineer, also a former chemistry teacher. And so kind of science and those sorts of truthiness, that sort of thing really matters to me. I'm also a mom. So I really hope that along with the rest of you all, I understand the real threat that the climate crisis is posing, not just to America, but also to the world at large. Climate change, as we've all talked about, is real. Human behavior is causing it and making it worse. And these effects that we are seeing will impact not only our natural environment, but also national security and our economic vitality as well. And that is one way, when you're talking about these issues in our communities, in our purple places like the 6th Congressional District, that people really tune in, is when you talk about the impact on national security. Our community, Chester County and Berks County is where I serve, has really experienced all of this firsthand. And I know that Mary Gay, Representative Scanlon talked about this too. Extreme rainfall, winds, flooding from Hurricane Ida, tornadoes just about a year ago this month severely damaged many, many homes in my community and my businesses, so much infrastructure across the region. We saw damage that we've never, if ever, really seen before. Chester County specifically was declared a federal state of emergency as a result of this. And this every 100-year event happened now twice in the last 3 months in my community. So we need to be paying attention to that. In order to secure our planet's future, we have to act now. We have to invest, as many of my colleagues have said already, in clean energy sources, grid electrification, climate resiliency, technologies that will help reduce our carbon footprint. And that's why I was very proud, as my colleagues were as well, to get the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed, which is called the IIJA, and signed into law. They recommended that you take a look at those two, and that too, in addition to the Inflation Reduction Act. Among other measures that was in this historic piece of legislation were investments in carbon reduction, in public transportation, in power and grid infrastructure, in low and zero emission vehicles investments, electric vehicle charging stations, which we need very much as you get sort of west of the city of Philadelphia. It becomes less and less easy for you to find a charging station. It also includes a lot of conversation about environmental justice and remediation, as we've spoken about before. The IIJA was a really big step forward in addressing the climate crisis, but our commitment, as Mary Gay and Madeline said, didn't really stop there. The work of Congress didn't stop there in the 117th. Indeed, we pressed on, and we passed the most transformative climate legislation ever in history. And I was really, really proud to vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which has this holistic and comprehensive approach to climate issues and makes historic investments in clean energy. And it's expected, as mentioned previously, to reduce emissions by about 40% by the year 2030. And we can already see the changes happening. And I'll give you one example in our community. Recently, I had the chance to go to a ribbon cutting ceremony for a new microgrid that is in the Westchester or West Grove area. the company that this microgrid is installed for is solving a bunch of different problems. First of all, it's solved for its energy independence by installing a microgrid with really innovative battery storage technology. Second of all, the purpose of this company, its mission, its product is to is to reduce and renew and recycle equipment, technologies that are used by places like schools, computers as an example. They help to recycle those computers, which helps us as taxpayers be able to save money and help school districts reduce their costs. So this particular example that I'm showing you is really just a virtuous circle. Out in the West Grove area, if you've had a chance to be out there, it's not really known for renewable energies, but here is a seed of something that's happened as a result of the IRA and investments because of provisions there. So I'm also, I'll end by saying I'm also really proud and want to make sure the conversation also includes the national security elements of it, because I know that we're very, very excited about the Inflation Reduction Act, and we're excited about infrastructure and investments as well. But it's really important that this also be a complete conversation. I also serve on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees in Washington. Frequently, the climate and issues of resilience are regular topics in those particular committees. You know, and I'll conclude with this, when the Pentagon and the Pope and the petroleum companies are all saying that climate change is real, that we should probably all stand up and take note if we haven't already. So for this reason and many others, I'm really glad to be here today with Congresswoman Dean and Scanlon to talk about how these remarkable and historic efforts in Congress will positively impact our Pennsylvanian communities, and to challenge us to continue to keep that work going. And with that, I'll thank you and hand it back over to you, Flora.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Houlihan, and all of you for those opening remarks. We're going to get started into a little bit more of a discussion and Q&A session now. So please, again, if you are tuning in, definitely open the Q&A feature and start putting your questions in there. We had a few questions submitted in advance, though, so I'll get us started with those as people add questions in. So the first question that we've been getting a lot is, what are these specific tax credits and programs in the Inflation Reduction Act? I'll add, the bipartisan bill as well. And how can everyday people actually, take advantage of them? And I think this is really critical, because in order to see the emissions reductions that we need to see, the spring of clean energy we need to see, we actually need to make sure these programs are being utilized. So, and certainly I have some information here too, but I'd love to turn it over to you all to talk about, what these programs are, how can people take advantage? And I also see a lot of, local and state elected officials or staff on the call. So if there's ways that, local and state officials, nonprofits can help, disseminate this information as well, I think that's part of it. But Rep. Scanlon, how about you get us started?
Sure. So there's a lot of different types of tax credits that American families can take advantage of. Most notably up to $2,000 for home energy efficiency upgrades, and up to 30% of the cost of installing solar panels or other renewable energy generators, and as much as $14,000 for home electrification, like buying an electric stove or a heat pump. So there's also $7,500 in tax rebates for new American-made electric vehicles, or $4,500 for used. And there are a lot of specifics with respect to all of them. I think one thing that's really important is the Department of Energy has a handy tool to help consumers understand which credits they can qualify for. So they can go to the website energy.gov. And that also lets you sign up for email updates, so you can get notifications when new benefits become available, because some of these things are getting phased in over time. And I would just also encourage folks to contact our offices if they're having trouble figuring out what's going on or how to access some of these things, because we should be able to help people through our constituent services efforts.
That is great. Thank you so much. Rep. Dean or Houlihan, do either of you have things to add?
I would just call people's attention to the right-hand side in the chat. There are some good links there for people to click on and to get, better and updated information. And I think that those are probably the best current source of information as well.
And I would just add, go to my website, call our office, email our office, because it is a long list of resources, tax credits, and other incentives. Whether it's for domestic manufacturing or literally for clean agriculture. We have very diverse districts, and so supporting small businesses as they move toward energy efficiency, agriculture as it moves, individual households. We have a fact sheet on the impacts in Pennsylvania. And alongside all of those opportunities, I really want to lift up the jobs piece, that in order for us to build the infrastructure necessary for clean energy, we will be creating good paying jobs, family sustaining jobs, alongside the mission of protecting the planet and turning back the clock on climate change. What Chrissy said is so true. This is a human impact that we are seeing. And that gives me real hope, because if human beings are causing this, human beings have the ability to fix this. And so that's why this is such a historic moment. You guys have been fighting for this for a really long time. So it's been great to partner with you and finally move this across the finish line. I think of public health. This will have the impact of reducing asthma, chronic asthma, and asthma attacks, just the ability to have cleaner air. The environmental injustice piece, I think, is so critically important. I was driving through an area and my coworker said, this is an area particularly hard hit with cancers and pediatric cancers. That is us impacting our environment, impacting long-term health. In my district, I care a lot about PFAS water contamination because we have that legacy from what was the Willow Grove Naval Air Base. We need to use resources from this for those purposes as well. So call us, go to our website, go to the energy website, but there's lots there for individuals, businesses, farms, and others to access.
Absolutely. And I wanted to echo that some of these programs will be coming out in a rolling fashion. So I'm sure all of the members here and other elected officials, groups like ours, will work to disseminate that information to on social media, via email. We're making a consumer guide, which hopefully will be helpful for folks. And I know we'll be working with officials at every level to try to get this information out there. Some programs will come through the state as well. And I know state officials are soliciting plans from municipalities and counties already as well. So we'll definitely work hard to make sure this information is out there. One thing I saw was about small businesses in the chat quickly. So I want to say that, yes, there's of course tax credits and incentives for Pennsylvanian families, but also for small businesses that want to improve energy efficiency and go to clean energy. Put solar panels on their roofs, etc. So those opportunities are also really huge and hopefully should incentivize, those businesses to move towards cleaner development. So there's
Can I just give a specific to that, a little more specific to it? Pennsylvania has more than 1 million small businesses, as Chrissy knows a lot about business and running businesses. So in this bill, commercial building owners can receive a tax credit up to $5 per square foot to support energy efficiency improvements, reducing their utility bills, reducing their impact on the environment. That's a really tangible thing and an incentive for small business owners to make the investments they want to make and reduce their costs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for clarifying. Rep. Houlihan?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat as well, and some of the questions are really good questions that I will find the answer to. One in particular that's caught my eye is the nonprofits or places of worship and their eligibility. I know that when we were going through COVID and the PPP program, that there was a lot of adjustments that needed to be made to make sure that all different kinds of organizations and businesses would be eligible to avail themselves of that support. And so I don't know the specific example for this format of business, but happy to try and take a look at that. Similarly, I do believe that, and I have, see a question in the chat as well about geothermal. I have geothermal too. My house is too shady as well. I with large degree of confidence, believe that that is also covered in addition to what's going on in solar power as well.
Yes, geothermal is included. Thank you for sharing more about the small businesses and for looking into, other designations. And again, we will certainly send these resources out via email to everyone too, to make sure you have the links and information about all these tax credits. And as we come up with consumer guides, as our elected officials are, sharing this information. We'll make sure to amplify it and share it with all of you as well. To take us in a slightly different direction, of course, everyone on this call has been advocating for a long time for climate action. And throughout the last year and a half, there's been, a lot of momentum towards passing a bill and a lot of roadblocks until it finally got done in August. So I wanted to talk more on that side of things and ask you all what you think is key to this bill finally passing and getting to the finish line, and maybe what we can learn from this process as we look, towards the future. Whoever'd like to start, please go ahead.
I will start in the reality that is today, in a very narrow margined House and Senate, where it's hard. And as Representative Scanlon said, to get things done in the traditional, I'm just a bill, schoolhouse rock kind of thing. And so this particular solution ended up having to go through a very different process, reconciliation, which is only available by the party in the majority, and only available if both House and Senate are controlled by a party in the majority. And so if for whatever reason we're not able to have 60 votes in the Senate and the majority in the House on something as important as additional resources for the environment, we can rely on this reconciliation tool, but only if we have a majority of people in the House and the Senate who would like to move forward on reconciliation. So that's why Representative Scanlon's emphasis on continued advocacy and continued access to the ballot and voting is so critical, because it's looking as though we will be in a situation possibly with split House and Senate, and even if not so, very close margins as we have had in the last couple of years. So this is pretty remarkable that this got across the finish line. It took a lot of arm twisting and a lot of fortune, I think, but it also took a lot of you guys advocating and voting.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It really was the advocacy that got this across the line, not with everything that all of us wanted to have in it, but with what was possible given the margins we have. So, that's where we need to keep the pressure on, and we need your help to do it.
And I would echo those sentiments. Advocates for years pushing and pushing and pushing is what made the difference. You put that together with at least enough electeds who care desperately about this issue. That's why elections matter. I've been saying you could be a single issue voter on this issue alone. There's lots of other issues people could be single issue about. But if we don't protect our planet, none of the others will really matter. And so it is about electing people who care about this issue. And it is on both sides of the aisle. And it is about your continued advocacy. None of this would have happened without your advocacy.
Thank you so much. I like to make sure everyone really hears that on the call. All the times we ask you to make your voice heard, it really does make a difference. Are there any other thoughts any of you would like to share on this question or this piece?
Yeah, I will say when we're kind of skirting around partisanship here, I will say that there has been an evolution in my 3 short years, in Congress, in terms of approaches to the direness that we know is climate change. What I see on the Armed Services or Foreign Affairs committees and the small business committees as well, coming from the right side of the aisle, from the Republican side of the aisle, has changed within just a few years in terms of some of the language and the concern that is being expressed. So it matters, your advocacy matters. It's making a difference and moving the needle. I will be attending, likely will be attending COP27, which is a big climate conference for the second time. Attended COP26 with a bipartisan delegation that's going. Last time, the 26th, was the first time that a bipartisan delegation went ever. And so we're making some progress there too.
That's great. Thank you so much. And of course, this bill is a big step forward. We finally have some climate action. You'll all be able to take advantage of the incentives and even things beyond climate. Rep. Scanlon mentioned it earlier, but there's a lot of money in both bills now for the Superfund program, and Pennsylvania has one of the largest amounts of Superfund sites of any state in the country. There's money for lead, there's money for transportation. But of course, even with all of these investments, there's still more work to do. So really the science is very clear that to stop the worst impacts of climate change, we need to cut climate emissions in half by 2030 at least, move much more rapidly towards a zero emission future. And of course, there's a lot of work, I think, still to be done. So I wanted to ask you all here, what's next in the climate fight? How can Pennsylvanians, the folks on this call, continue to best make their voices heard? What are the best things, we can all keep pushing for? And again, anyone who'd like to start, please go ahead.
Well, I know we are all fighting for the Thrive Act to make sure that we move that along. There's a whole host of legislation that we still need to work on. I don't anticipate that we're going to get much of it done in the 3 days that we have remaining before the election season is upon us and we're all home in our districts. But we do feel the pressure to come back either at the end of this Congress or certainly revitalize in a new Congress to get more across the finish line in terms of, God bless you, in terms of protecting our environment. So there's a lot more that we want to do. A lot more we need to do with water, a lot more we need to do with air, clean manufacturing, and the rest.
I would say that the advocacy is something that we've been talking a lot about here. And of course, there's more to be done at the federal level and at the state level. But I also would point out that there's a lot to be done to help educate people and organizations about what is available to them. And a lot of what's available through Infrastructure and Jobs Act, or even the Inflation Reduction Act, is competitive. It's competitive grants. And so if you have the ability to help an organization to compete, for some of the resources that are available, whether it's a for-profit or a part of a school district or a city or borough, do it, because it's game on right now, and you can bet that other places are competing right alongside of us. So as Pennsylvanians, I say this to my community all the time, I'll be damned if New York and California get all of the resources that we've just worked so hard for. So please, if you have the energy to help, connect an organization or a district to resources, please do that.
And I think just the final important piece of this is it is so forward looking. It is encouraging the development of the research, the technology, the things we need to take the next steps. And so there's lots of opportunity for the scientists among the crowd to really help push that envelope forward, because we don't have all the technology, we don't have all the systems we need yet in order to achieve the really significant changes we need to in order to combat climate change. So still looking for whoever can deal with the plastic bottle issue.
Yes, we're with you on that. Certainly we could have a whole conversation about plastics as well. One thing that Rep. Houlihan mentioned, which is grants, and there was a question too about school districts. So I wanted to say that's a big area where I think there could be a lot of forward movement. There's funding for electric school buses, which can help, clean up our air, especially our kids who are vulnerable riding and waiting for buses at tailpipe height. And I think that's just one example where if you're a, municipal or county official on the call right now, there are ongoing grant programs for school districts to apply for funding for electric buses. And I'm sure through this program, there'll be opportunities for putting solar on schools and making other, progress there. So I'd certainly encourage, municipal and state county officials to make sure they're taking advantage of those resources and getting it out to their school districts in the state. I'm not sure if any of you have any other insights there, how maybe school districts can make sure they're tapping in.
We've actually had different meetings with school districts and administrators to say, we want to help you access any resources, programs, resources for electric vehicles, et cetera. So I ask people in my 4th congressional district, connect with us and we will do our best to make sure that any grant programs that are available, any other tax credits, any other things that you need to take or you have the opportunity to take, we want to help you. We also have the ability through community project funding to support schools and other worthy programs around climate and around the protection of our environment, especially in the area of our school children.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to working with all of you too to keep that information coming. So there's been a lot of questions about, just the timeline or, of these programs or who qualifies. So I just want to point out that in the chat, Ellie dropped in a few resources on that. We've talked a little bit about that out loud, and certainly we'll email you all that information as well. And as you heard here today, all the members of Congress, groups like Penn Environment, I'm sure our local and state officials here will also help disseminate that information. You can sign up for updates at some of the places in the chat as well. So the timelines and who qualifies and that sort of thing, we will definitely keep sharing that information. There's also a few questions we've gotten related to just, we just passed this bill, a couple of bills this year that have been very forward thinking, can set up this funding. How safely in place is this now that it's passed? Can this be undone or ignored next session? Is there anything, if so, is there anything we can do to make sure that these investments actually are here for the long term?
I guess I would just, we've seen what has happened, for example, under the last administration with the EPA, with rollbacks of regulations that were put in place to implement congressional intent to protect the environment. We just had a Supreme Court decision recently that questioned the EPA's ability to issue regulations. So certainly there is the opportunity for shenanigans to undermine the clear intent of Congress if another party gets into power or another faction gets into power. So again, it goes back to people's right to vote and to make their desires with respect to the environment known through their votes.
I think it's a really important question, Flora. And this is a very tuned in audience, I know. Elections matter. So while we have been able to craft this legislation, move it through by way of a very difficult process of reconciliation, and it is signed into law, it is the law of the land. We know that those who did not support it, should they get greater power, their agenda will be to undo it. Previous administration underfunded EPA, rolled back emission standards. This administration, this EPA, for example, on that issue of PFAS water contamination, put out a new health advisory limit down to less than 1 part per trillion, less than 0.4, I think, parts per trillion. That shows the spirit and the values and the policies of this slim majority and the administration. So while this is exciting, this will roll out over the next 8 years or more. It can be harmed, undone, if a different set of thinkers get in office. I always say budgets reveal priorities. And so this is a large expenditure bill. There are resources, revenues in it also. Part of it is paid for by reinstating the Superfund tax on polluters. But a different set of values could undo the extraordinary future thinking work that this bill is.
I would say my colleagues know that of the three of us, I tend to be the one that is the more glass half empty, kind of person. But I would say in this particular case, I have hope. I have hope that not every aspect of it will be permanent, but if we get moving on it and get going on the work that we've done, that it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy, that we will accomplish what we need to accomplish, that people will, not dissimilar to healthcare issues, will recognize this is something that we cannot live without. So I hope that while there are definitely opportunities to have malicious actors undo some of the really hard work that has gotten us here, it's also really hard to get things done in the body of Congress. And so I challenge people to get them undone at this point in time, and challenge everybody to, to move forward as quickly as we can with what we've provided for.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time here, but hopefully can do one last question or two. We also are getting a lot of questions about, the maybe compromises that went along with this bill. So right now we're hearing a lot of talk about, the potential to roll back NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, or potential side deals that would promote fossil fuels being kind of debated or discussed in the Senate right now. Things haven't moved over to you all yet, but I guess some questions are along the lines of, what's the real story here? What's going on? What can we do to make sure our important environmental protections stay in place, and that we're, not moving backwards at this time of progress?
I think there've been a number of expressions of concern. There was a letter that was sent by about 70 members from the House saying, we are very concerned about the suggestion that we could be rolling back those NEPA regulations, et cetera. So it doesn't seem to be a done deal. It apparently was part of the negotiations behind closed doors. But the problem sometimes with negotiations behind closed doors is you don't have everybody on board who needs to be. So we're all closely watching what's happening in the Senate. I think I just saw that Senator Kaine came out and said that he wouldn't support it. So, and we know Saunders isn't. So I think it's an uphill battle at this point, but a lot can change in DC in a very short amount of time.
Thank you for that insight. Do either of you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add. We watch every single day what is going on. The rumors fly. So I talk to my legislative director a couple times a day. What do we know? What's coming from the Senate? What agreement? What was the agreement made behind closed doors and not conveyed? And so I don't have a good lens into that one.
Thank you for sharing the insight you do have, and certainly a lot of groups like ours are doing advocacy around protecting NEPA, making sure these important protections stay in place. And so if we hear anything too, we'll definitely be in touch. I think, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'd like to end with one last question. Thank you all for all of you who submitted questions. We'll try to be in touch with some answers outside of this webinar, but of course, our members here are very busy, so I want to be respectful of your time. So I'd like to end with one last question for you, which is really just if you could all go around and share maybe the main thing you want folks to take away from this, either this bill or how it happened, but include in that any closing remarks, any final thoughts you'd like to share. And then after we go around and do that, I'll end with a call to action so folks here too know what our next steps are. So yeah, main thing you want folks to take away and any closing remarks you'd like to share.
I'll go first because I was last.
Great. Reverse order.
Yeah. Main thing to share. Participatory government matters. There is hope, and I think there is movement, although not rapidly enough, amongst the population to understanding how dire this situation is. And I appreciate the chance to speak with you guys today.
Thank you so much. Rep. Scanlon?
Sure. I think similarly, this clearly is an issue where there's a generational urgency because younger people in this country correctly perceive that the environmental issues are an existential threat. Some of the more seasoned, I'm trying to think of whatever. Some folks in government don't see it the same way. And so I think the increasing activism and the really effective activism that we've seen from newer generations to politics is really, really important. Without that, we don't get the change that we need to see and that we did see pushed through. As I said before, not everything that we wanted, not everything we need, but a good first step. And certainly the impacts that we're seeing around the country. We're about to have a hurricane hit Tampa. that unfortunately brings more people to the side of realizing that the time is now, if not yesterday, to get some of this done. So thank you for convening.
Yes, thank you so much. I certainly agree. The time is now. Absolutely.
I'll just be brief, but I'll say with great optimism, change is possible. And that you advocates, the scientists, the researchers, alongside government and businesses, we have to do this all together. I think back on 10 years ago when I was in the State House. I don't know if you remember some of the hearings that we had where the administration at that time would not use the word climate change, did not connect human behavior to climate change, absolute resistance to acknowledge the human impact on our planet. So I am so optimistic because look how far we've come in 10 years. Obviously, it's at a critical time. We can't afford to slow down in any way. We have to speed up. But I'm just optimistic that change is possible, and it comes through an intersection of advocates, the science community, and government has this important role to play. We can't sit back.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. And I hope everyone on the call really takes that to heart. Myself and all of you and people all across the state, all across the country and world have, I know, been making our voices heard for climate action for a long time. And I definitely feel more hopeful than ever that really we can continue making our voices heard, work with all the communities Rep. Dean just mentioned, work with these champs in Congress and great elected officials that we do have here at the state, local, federal level to keep pushing forward climate solutions. So I just want to thank you all so much for your work. And thank you so much for joining us, for voting for this bill. Of course, the work's not over, as you heard. Though the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is a huge step forward, we definitely still have a lot of work to do to lower climate pollution, tackle this existential threat, and really move towards a clean, renewable energy powered future where all of us, have a livable climate to call home. And we definitely need you all to keep making your voices heard to do that. So just so folks know what's next for us at Penn Environment, we are part of a national campaign really focused on driving up ambition across the Biden administration, focused on a set of, pollution standards, making sure that we're using every tool at our disposal to tackle climate pollution. So we're going to be using the momentum of this bill, of this climate action, to help us encourage the Biden administration across agencies to put forward, strengthen pollution standards to lower air pollution, lower climate pollution, protect our health, and really get to that goal of cutting climate pollution in half by 2030. So as those rules come up, as there's public comment periods and opportunities to engage, we'll certainly let you all know so that we can, make sure you all have what you need to make your voices heard and make sure they all know that Pennsylvanians want the strongest air and climate pollution rules possible. And of course, we'll continue our advocacy at the local and state level as well. So to stay up to date on those rules and other climate action, Ellie, I'd love for you to share your screen again so we can share a few ways that you can take action. The first is that I would love for you all to join Penn Environment's Mobile Action Network. This is a texting program. We send a couple of texts a month, so nothing too crazy. But that way you'll know about updates if there's a call we want you to make or a comment we'd like you to sign or an event like this coming up in your area. So to sign up, you can text the words PA Climate to the number 484-229-0050. That'll opt you in to getting our updates, again, petitions, events, comment periods, big moments of action. So that's a great way to stay up to date. You can also make your voice heard for a renewable energy future right now by following these links. Add your name to our petition, keep making your voices heard, show everyone that Pennsylvanians do want this renewable energy future. And then you can take a step forward further than that too by recording a video to talk about why you care about climate action, why you want 100% renewable energy future for Pennsylvania, which we share on our social media, share with elected officials, and it just helps us tell the story of all the Pennsylvanians, all of you that care about this. So thank you so much for taking those actions. Again, we'll be in touch about EPA comment period, state action, things coming up. But in the meantime, thank you so much for making your voices heard, helping us get this climate bill to the finish line. And thank you so much again to Representatives Dean Scanlon and Houlihan, not just for voting for this bill and not just for joining us today, but for really making environmental protection and climate action a priority. I love working with you all and can't wait to keep pushing the action forward. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope everyone has a good day. You can watch this again on Facebook, but otherwise we'll be in touch with all the links and resources. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.